Thank you so much for joining us, Raghav. So this is actually a pretty special interview for me because almost 3 years back, you were the first person to actually give me an interview in Banjara, thanks to Meher. And that was with the college publication. And even when I was researching for this interview, I just typed Raghav Meattle in Google and that article popped up near the top. So it was sort of a full circle moment for me. And at that time, I think you had about 3,000 followers on Instagram, and now you have more than 10 times that amount. So just what's that journey been like? And did you ever expect to see this kind of success?
I mean, I think it's a journey. I think it's still a journey. But at the same time, you should celebrate every win that comes your way. And I think I've just done that. I've sort of kept at it consistently. I think that's what's the most important because I love doing it. It's an extension of who I am essentially, right? So it sort of comes very naturally to me. In fact, that article probably comes first because that's the first thing I sent to a lot of people because it's such a well written article which is why I jumped at this when you messaged me to do this interview. I jumped at it because I think, honestly, it's one of the best articles to profile me. So I usually use that to send to a lot of people if they want to read up more about the kind of stuff that I do. And generally, I think it's a great article. So amazing stuff. And I think good work just goes along the way, which is similarly to what I've done with my career. I think I've just sort of been sort of really, really particular about the kind of stuff that I do. Even if it's my music, even if it's collaborating with other artists, I only do stuff that I believe in. And I think my social media is an extension of that. I'm a marketer myself, so I mean, it sort of comes more naturally to me. So I know how to market and sort of build a brand. But of course, learning along the way and learning the nuances of it. But at the same time, I think it's just about being consistent, man. I've sort of social media is a tool that I use to market my music and market the brand. And it only can happen if you are building a constant narrative and doing that. And it can't happen if you're fake about it. I feel like if it's you, then it'll just come more naturally and you'll want to do it. If it just you're trying to project an image that is not you, you'll do it for a certain amount of time and then you leave it. Uh, right? If it's not working for you, but this is regardless, I'll still do it because I enjoy doing it. I'm just having fun essentially, and that's the most important, I would say.
Before I ask you about like the particulars of your social media and your marketing journey, it's almost 2 years now since Songs for a Matchbox got released. I think a month from now is when the 2 year anniversary actually is. And
Yeah.
that was probably the project that sort of catapulted you to where you are right now. And I just wanted to ask for our audience, you crowdfunded the album, it raised, I think, 4,70,000 totally.
Yeah.
A lot of people probably don't know the particulars of why an album actually costs this much to make. So could you just sort of explain, obviously not the bit by bit breakdown of the costing, but just why it costs so much for an album to actually be produced?
See, I think, I mean, most of it is studio costs, right? Because studio and videos, I think that's what you end up spending the most amount of money on. Studios are really expensive. So you spend about 2,500 rupees an hour in a studio. And typically to record one song, it takes you about 2 full days minimum in the studio if you're recording everything live. Which is 8 hour shift. So you can do the math. It's an expensive proposition. Of course, people do it out of their bedrooms, but I wanted to treat it like uh, as a serious project, which is why I thought I needed the money to do it because I didn't want. It's like songs last you a lifetime, right? Of course, you get better at it over time, but at the same time, you want to give it everything that you've got. So which is why I treated it like a project. Of course, even the musicians, like my project had to be completely live. Everything on that album is recorded live, which meant that I wanted to pay all the musicians that were playing on it. Also because I mean, when it's as a favor, then it can take you 2 years, right? Indie projects literally take 2 years to build an album. I did it in 6 months. That was only because I sort of got people into a room, said that, hey, I'm going to pay you a certain token amount. It wasn't like they were getting rich by it, but it was a token amount that I was paying all of these guys to sort of give me that time, and show up at the studio at this particular time, be more invested in it. Mixing is a pretty mastering costs money. So it's just these small elements of like putting an album together because it's like studio time. You pay a mixing mastering engineer, you pay your producer, you pay the musicians, you market the album with like a couple of videos, because otherwise it's not going to go anywhere. So making those videos, producing those artwork, designers. So it's about 25 people worked on this project with me. So you can imagine the scale of that. Um, and generally an album is a really hard thing to do, which is it's draining, right? I think most indie musicians who've done it themselves would tell you that.
But I guess you were fortunate enough to have a fan base who believed in you so much to give you this, like even more than what you expected, right? Because I think you wanted 3 lakh 50
Yeah,
and it came up to 4 lakh 70.
yeah,
For
yeah.
an independent musician today, what would you suggest their best avenue to fund their creative project would be?
So I'll tell you. I also had a fan base, sure, but a lot of it was still friends and family. You know, it was goodwill. It was like, for me, it was like people I'd worked with in my previous jobs. Uh, of course, because I put out a piece of content, I put out one song to show them that, hey, this is what my album is going to sound like. So here, if you want 7 more tracks which sound similar in this vibe, then pay for it. What I tell a lot of these young musicians who sort of reach out to me for understanding whether they should crowdfund a campaign. For me, when I went into it, it was basically like, even if I raise $50,000, it's still 50,000 less that I need to spend on my project. So, say for example, they put out a crowdfunding project, only their friends and family donate, right? 20 people end up donating to the album. It's still some money that they don't have to sort of think about, right? And that's really, it always helps you because it's so expensive otherwise that you might as well do these things to uh, crowdfund an album, and whatever you get is a bonus, right? So I think that's the best way. Other than that, I think I played a lot of gigs 1 year earlier. So a lot of people were expecting these songs. So people knew She Can, or people knew Better Than All was the first song anyway, but people knew Stood Up and Fright, for example, I'm Always Right, because they'd heard me at the gigs and they'll come to me and ask me, and they were part of the journey. It was also because I'd sort of been consistently posting about stuff on Instagram. So they knew the ethos of the album, they knew what it stood for. So it was very easy for them to put money behind it. And at the same time, I also gave them things to look at, right? So I gave them a mock up of a diary they could use, for example, right? I gave them a mock up of a t shirt that this is what you're going to pay for, right? Which meant that I had to sort of do that 2 months in advance with a graphic designer, go to a factory to see, like, okay, this is, I can totally deliver it in this price, put a price to it, got people to pay for it. So I think it's a project. Like ultimately, when you're asking anybody to shell out money from their wallet, you need to think it through yourself, because you need to know exactly what you're providing, because ultimately you want people to leave while, like, you want them to support it wholeheartedly. You give them a shitty t-shirt after you're done and they'll be like, man, this is such a waste of money, right? I wish I hadn't supported this guy, for example.
I think the answer that I expected also was when you said gigs, because I know that that is what a lot of independent musicians have been historically using to fund their creative art. Because as we know, streaming revenue is peanuts compared to what you get from gigs. But obviously now there
Yeah.
are gigs and musicians have to find alternative modes of revenue. And what I found interesting about what you're doing is with the Conemunity, where you're having these, live shows, virtual shows, and I think the fourth one is coming out soon. So could you just give us like a brief description of A, what the Conemunity is, and B, whether you see these virtual shows as a viable option in the near future, at least to gain some sort of revenue for independent artists?
100%. I think so. The community started with me just going live. I went bald, and people were making a lot of fun of me. And I just one night I found this cone filter, and I thought it was perfect. So I went live in that, and I just like called in a couple of people, and they blew my mind. Right, like there were people from Lucknow. I remember there was this girl from Lucknow. There was this guy from Jalgaon who I've sort of worked with really closely at the label that I work at now. So I just found like this crazy talent, and I was like, man, let me just do this more often. And I ended up doing it for 4 months consistently, and met about 700-800 artists right along the way. And I realized that there's so much more than it can be, so much more than just being an Instagram live, you know, because these guys became friends with each other. they would comment, and suddenly it became sort of, it started feeling like a community of sorts, right? And one thing that I learned as a musician who had moved to Bombay in a completely new city, because I was from Bangalore and earlier in Delhi, is that networking is everything, right? Like if you are going to come to a different city and just be sitting at home, it's not going to help you, right? You need to get out of your comfort zone, go for gigs, meet new musicians. That's how it happens. That's why a producer will work with you or another artist will play on your album, because you just know them, you're good friends with them. uh, so that's the opportunity that I realized that, I mean, Instagram virtually people can start doing it, and we're seeing collaborations happening every day now. Like people who met on this live are now putting out songs, collaborating with each other. So that was the idea. And then over time, I was like, let me just try and start focusing on the education aspect of it. So I did like about 10, 12 workshops on releasing your music, just which distributor to choose, how do you release your track, do you just put it out there, do you email certain people, all of that. And then we've sort of had like production workshops, we've had guitar workshops, so we've done about 15 odd workshops already. And we did this community showcase, so we were just picking 4 artists, the idea being that let them get some money to make their live experience even better. Like we've sort of had 100 tickets being sold for every community edition at 200 rupees each, and we don't keep a cut. Like I don't care. So we end up paying out these artists 5,000 bucks each, and some of these guys have never made any money through their music. They don't know how to make an invoice, so like, we're teaching them how to make an invoice and stuff like that, right? So at some point, like 5,000 bucks for that person, they can buy a really nice mic and maybe start recording their music at home. That's the idea. We got a sponsor last time, so we paid $50 additionally apart from the ticket price, which was sold. Every artist got $50 each from this organization. So I mean, yeah. So I mean, that gig, people took away 9,000 bucks for a 20-minute gig. So yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to do, where uh, these young singer-songwriters get some money to maybe invest back into their gear, make more money off their live gigs because they can provide a better experience to their audiences. Of course, live offline gigs were a big part of the ecosystem, but what I've realized over time is that unless you build a fan following on social media or for your music on Spotify and all of these streaming services, you'll still end up playing those gigs at the corner of a bar, right? Nobody will want to come and listen to your original music because you're just one guy standing in the corner and singing "Shape of You." Um, so, so that's the idea. So unless you build that sort of following and buzz around your music, and you have to be that person doing it for yourself.
But so, for instance, I was talking to another artist manager, and he had told me that, when you're putting out a virtual gig as opposed to a live, an actual in-person gig, the difference is that anyone can come and see it, right? And normally, what you as artists would do is you have a set and you take your set to different cities, right? So the problem that I then see with virtual gigs is once you do one, everyone who's interested can come and see it. But agar if you want to do one next week, how are you supposed to incentivize people to come and watch again? And if this was the primary mode of revenue for artists, how, in your experience and with other artists, how they sort of change this to sort of find different ways to, generate money.
See, I think it's about doing gigs closed doors. Like stand-up comedians do it all the time, right? They have the same material, but they're doing it to groups of 20 people, 30 people. And I'm not saying it's a valid point for sure, but there are ways to. Are you going to play your set on Instagram live, like 45 minutes? I think that's pointless because you're doing it for everybody. So the next time you do this, it's going to be like, I've seen that. The thing with music is that you don't mind listening to the same song again, right? Which, I mean, of course you want something new every time, but it's cool. Like if it's your favorite song, you'll be very happy if your favorite artist is playing it again. um, so I feel like that doesn't apply, but at the same time, like the advantage of it is that like I would never be able to reach a guy in Rajasthan or Madhya Pradesh or any of these cities, because I also play only tier 1 gigs, right? Tier 1 cities. I've barely gone to tier 2 cities to play a gig. So this gives me the sort of reach. Like I played a gig for Dice FM, which is like the streaming service. 1,200 people signed up for that gig. and about 400 were watching it on the day of the gig. And when I play at a bar in Delhi or Bombay or Calcutta, I'll get 100 people to show up and pay a sort of nominal fee to watch it, right? So that way I can in one go play to 400 people across where they don't even know what I sound like live. A lot of these people were watching me live for the first time. So, I mean, there are, of course, pros and cons to it. Of course, nothing can replace a live gig because, I mean, the bar is also paying you to sort of show up and play the gig and all of that. Of course, it doesn't, but there are ways to sort of navigate through that right now where you can play closed door gigs, 30 people. If you're playing a gig next week, most likely that same person is not going to attend it, right? So you attract 30 new people to come and watch your gig. And if he's such a big fan, he wants to come again, great, let him come. Like he'll still enjoy it because he's obviously bought a new ticket. So yeah, I mean, closed door gigs, minimum capacity, don't keep it open to everybody. I think that's the model. If you want to look at it from a money standpoint, that should be a way to go.
And something that a lot of people might not know about you is that aside from being a singer-songwriter, you're also a marketing lead for brand and streaming partnerships at Big Bang. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
ask, how are you balancing this between being able to fuel your creative process to actually make music and also having this actual professional commitment to be a professional in this side of the industry as well?
So I wish I could say that I balance it out well, but I don't actually. Like, I mean, it's a lot of sleepless nights, but at the same time, uh, my music does take a bit of a backseat. It's something that I do for the fun of it, right? I want to enjoy my music, and that's the call I took about 1.5, 2 years ago when I was like, hey, like, do I want to keep doing what I really like doing and not be dependent on the money for it? I took that call about 1.5, 2 years back, and very clearly in my head, it became like priority one and priority two. So, priority one right now is my job. But the beautiful part about that is that I'm still in the music business, which only helps my artist career because it opens up more doors. I know more people. Everybody takes me more seriously when I approach it as an artist. I take myself more seriously because I know so much more. So that I've sort of found that sweet spot, but am I balancing it out? No, like I'm super slow at releasing new music. I wouldn't have been able to do this if I hadn't given it that 2.5 years of just doing music full time because I've already built something. Now I'm just trying to sort of keep doing stuff. I'm not in such a big hurry to release 10 tracks a year, right? Like I'll do four or five a year, and that's good for me. Like I'm just trying to do it as well I can balance it. When it comes to gigs, I mean, gigs are on weekends and stuff, so it sort of gives me the time to do it. I have a band in place, so it's not like I need to build a set from scratch. So it's a lot of compromises, but it's just something that I decided to do because I didn't want to be completely dependent on indie music for the money, right? Even though I would make enough, it was just one of those things where I was like, I want to be more than just an artist because that's the kind of person I am. I want to know more and explore more than just siloing myself as just being an artist.
I mean, I guess it's something that a lot of independent artists in this country have to reconcile with that, doing this full time as a profession, how long term and how sustainable is it for a lot of artists here, really? Like, do you think that at some point most independent artists need to make this evaluation for themselves, or do you think that if they reach a certain threshold that they actually can sustain it? Because even when I was watching this latest Netflix documentary, The Creative Indians, which had Surikant and the rest of Peter Cat on it, even those guys who one would say are at the top of Indian independent music, signed by a Parisian label also, they also say this industry sucks. We barely make money from it. So
Yeah.
would you suggest that most independent artists sort of try to do a balancing act?
So I think it's a very personal decision. It is a really hard industry. Is it possible to make a living off independent music? No. Is it possible to make a brand out of yourself and make a living? Yes. Right. So I would say like I make more money off like brand deals on Instagram than my music. Right. So I think that's something that you can also navigate through, right? Because you're not just an artist, you're not a one-dimensional person, right? You stand for a bunch of things as an artist, right? Like my ethos is a lot more than just be make a guy who makes indie music, right? So that is something that people should explore. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a really tough industry. If you have the backing, if you have the sort of peace of mind also, right? Like for me, it was more peace of mind driven than being like, hey, am I not being able to make do? Or it was always hand to mouth. But I was able to survive in Bombay, which is a really expensive city, right? So I think it's about finding that right balance. If you're okay in your head, saying that, hey, 2 years I can live like this, and hope that something cool comes out of it in the future, because sometimes you have to give it that much time also, right? If you really want to build something massive, you want to be giving it 10 hours a day, right? And that's the compromise I made when I decided to not do this full time. um, right? Like a Pratik Kuhad has done that, right? Like he's the perfect example of making it happen, right? He's done those right things to sort of be in that spot. It's come through a lot of mix of Hindi and English, but he's done it, right? So that's the call you need to take if you're okay with it. Like Hanita is doing a great job of it. Like she's sort of making like a brand herself, where she talks about not only music. Of course, music is the main part that she's trying to market, but it's a full 360 approach to how you're going to market yourself.
I feel the industry that compares a lot with music, independent music today, is stand-up comedians in the country, and there's also
Yeah.
a lot of link with it between the two, especially with Son of a Beach, which you've played at. A lot of independent musicians have played at, and these comedians have done what you're saying very well. Is what I'm seeing, where they've created a brand for themselves. They make a consistent name through social media, whether it's Tanmay Bhatt's YouTube channel or Samay Rena with this chess. He's taken that to the next level right lately. So, would you say that streaming, in the sense of Twitch and YouTube, and making your digital presence a regular thing, is a way for artists to not just increase brand value and social media presence, but to actually generate money? Because there are ways to get donations and
100%.
other outlets.
100%, man. Like, that's the way to do it. Like, it not only drives relevance to your brand, but also, I mean, if a lot of people are streaming you on YouTube, uh, you are going to get multiple. I mean, you're going to make decent money off it. Like, even streaming revenue that way. Like, stand-up comedians don't have that, but musicians have that. Like I make a decent amount through my music. You make about 10 paisa per stream on Spotify, which is, I mean, of course, it's not a lot, but at some point it becomes like a monthly thing. Like I expect that check coming in once a month, because I know it's become a part of like one of the things. It's become a substantial amount for me to look forward to it. So I mean, that's something that happens. YouTube is a great platform. It pays very, very little, but then it's all about scaling up, right? So if you do it consistently for 1 year, maybe you'll be able to make some money off it. So 100%, but it's all about being relevant, right? If you're going to do it every day, even if you're not making money off streaming, but there are enough people listening, your brands will come to you and say that, hey, can you just give me a shout out in your life? Because there's so many touch points, right? Suddenly you've got so many touch points. I was actually listening to a podcast by Tanmay Bhatt only, that Advertising is Dead podcast, which Varun Dudhiala does. And it was about that. Like he spoke about how gone are the days when you can show up once a week. I'm making sure I'm touching the lives of somebody like every single day. So I'm constantly in the back of their heads.
This entire virtual lockdown has sort of created these online communities that, even though they exist in these small bubbles where
Yeah.
your community is only like 100 people who tune into your Instagram live, that 100 people become such a core following.
Evangelist.
I'm
They
noticing
become
a lot of,
evangelist. Yeah.
every day at 12 a.m. if I go on Instagram, like every independent artist I follow, at least five of them will have a live with
Yeah.
maybe just like 20, 30 people there. But it is something that people are turning to.
100%.
Thing that I want to ask about revenue, which I've talked to other artists about, is movies, where now they're actually saying that, okay, yeah, we want to stay away from Bollywood, but the Indian film industry is being a bit more open with the kind of musicians and the kind of songs that they're incorporating. Like, for instance, Hanuman Kind was in a Kannada movie, and he released a track called Mahadeva, which is hugely popular now. And that's definitely the biggest song. And you also were working on What Are the Odds, I think, which is a slightly more indie film by the Indian film industry standards, but still, it's an Abhay Deol film. It still is a fairly big project. Do you think that
Yeah.
independent artists should turn to the film industry for both commercial and popularity sake?
Yeah. Man, the problem is that I mean, independent artists can turn to the industry, but it's about who you know and who's listening to your music and stuff like that. So I happen to what are the odds happened to me because I was the I was the backup singer. Like I had sung on the scratch, and it was just I mean, it was just like it was a punk rock song, and like they tried to find people that could do it, but it just like I just got lucky. You know what I mean? I just got lucky that they just stuck to that voice and they tried to dub it with a couple of other people, but it didn't work because it was also like not the most usual song. So they were like, let's just go with it. So that's how it happened for me. But uh, it's just that like I've sung on so many scratches, but they don't end up going in my voice because it's just. I mean, I'm trying to strike relationships with music composers essentially, right? Um, at some point, they'll see that value in it. But yeah, I think it's more like the OTT ecosystem is what you should try and sort of target through like publishing deals. Like, I think that's the idea. Like, I got into a publishing deal recently so that I can explore that sort of side of the business where somebody's actively pitching my music to OTTs and uh, licensing it out to places because I feel like that has the relevance. Whoever's making an English OTT might need a ready-made track, which I have different touch points with my music, and maybe it could work. So I think that's one route that you should explore. Like get in touch with the publishing, uh, like basically a house who does all of these pretty embedded into the OTT ecosystem. I think that would be that's important. Otherwise, like how tracks are being built, I think that's happening, but it's a very sort of clicky network, right? So if you're in that network, great. But there's no organized system where you can actually like say that, hey, I'm open to singing on Hindi music or Hindi movies, and people will come to you saying, yeah, let's do it. It's a gradual process. It takes its own time. I've been a little picky about the things that I want to do also, which is why what are the odds happened to me because I felt like this was literally
Yeah.
if I had to do an Indian sort of movie debut kind of a thing, then this is the perfect project. Like Sagar is a great like offbeat sort of left of center composer, doesn't do any mainstream stuff. So I've sort of tried to sort of do songs that I only really like doing, which is what I was saying in the very beginning, where I have been picky about it. You give me an advertising jingle to do, I'll do anything. But I want to sort of plan my sort of, even if I do a song like how Pratik Kuhad has done it, right? Like he's not singing anything and everything he gets. He'll do the stuff that is Pratik Kuhad, right? Like that's what I want to do for myself also, where I want to not do any random stuff because it's Bollywood. Like I feel gone are the days when random tracks become popular because it's Bollywood. It doesn't work anymore. Yeah.
Just a segue entirely from this music discussion, you also label yourself on Instagram as music memes, political satire. So, and since I've been following you for a while, I've also just noticed that gradually, as things become more depressing, I would say, in this country, you've also started to take the social media to actively call out what's been happening more and more. And I think generally within the independent music industry, there is a voice of dissent, a voice of going against the grain. But
Hmm.
would you think that this sort of inhibits your reach, speaks too much
100%.
against power?
I mean, otherwise, I don't get the only hate I get is because of my political stance. You should see my DMs, man. They're disgusting. But yeah, I mean, I actually don't. I play it safe, man. Like honestly, you look at other comedians and all of these guys, they are going all out. I'm pretty safe about it. Like I feel I'm not very out there. I would love to be, but I'm like I sometimes feel like, am I being sort of an armchair activist where it's just about being relevant? Ultimately, it's about being relevant again, right? Like, why am I saying these things on social media? Because I'm just trying to be like, hey, this is my point of view. So I'm sort of a little cognizant of that, which is why I don't want to be like only that. Um and most of the time, for my entire Instagram, everything is pretty like it's not impulsive at all. I would have some thought to it. Whatever I post on political things, it's complete impulse. Like I see something, I'm so mad at it that I just post it. So I think that's what it is. Like it's complete impulse. So it definitely impacts my reach. I get so much hate for it. Will I stop doing it? No, not at all. Will I tone it down? As in, tone it down is also not the right word. Will I do it a little more cleverly or like a little more nuanced? Yeah, I do that. I don't like, because it's ultimately we're also in an echo chamber. Like my entire Instagram feed is anti the government, right? But there's a whole other world that I don't know about. They're wrong, but I mean, I still want to be able to listen to them. So yeah, I mean, it's political satire for a reason, right? Even my album One Sided Stories is very nuanced. Like if you get it, you get it. I'm not going to be like screw you X Y Z. I that's not. I'm a pretty diplomatic person that way, so I won't ever do that. Um, yeah, I just feel really strongly about it, and it's just one of those ways I get it out and sort of pull some, I mean, ruffle some feathers maybe. Yeah, I wish I did more though. Like, I mean, forget social media, but I wish I had more time to do more stuff. It's getting scary.
But a lot of it is in your satire in your Instagram page, and some of it is in your music, like one-sided stories. And there are
Yeah,
independent artists are taking this sort of, but they're not being so explicit about saying, okay, for instance, say like Scavengers, right? When they made Modi a message to you, that is directly in your face,
yeah.
as explicit as it gets, right?
The video is
That's a brilliant song,
yeah.
but compared to that, like even Suryakant's music or Sida Moth, Prabdeep, all these guys, they're saying it, but they're
Where
not.
the money goes. Yeah,
Yeah, they're not
yeah.
saying it, but they're still taking to whether it was playing a Shaheen Bagh or attending protests. How much would you say independent music artists should take an active stand in their music to talk against power, to fight against power?
Man, I feel that's what artists do. Like, like you should. I mean, you should be talking about that's art for me. Like, I mean, when I look at artists who can only write love songs, for example, right? I just feel like how one-dimensional are you, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure you got to feel for other things in like the world around you, right? So, I mean, that I feel very strongly about. I feel, and I'm not saying nobody. If you don't, some people are just like don't care, right? Which is fine. Like, you don't you don't need to have a political opinion, honestly. Like I also feel that way. Like it's great if you do, I would really appreciate it, but it's fine if you don't feel so strongly enough for it to come out in your art. But I feel that's what artists do, man. Like you have to, whatever you feel strongly about, you should be able to write about and or paint it out or express in your own art form. And I think art typically across history has sort of stood for a lot of things beyond just like personal expression. So yeah, 100%. Like full power to everybody who's doing it, and it's so awesome. That's the beauty of creating something unique, and you're saying it in your own way. I love that.
But I feel like the entire industry, when they do speak truth to power, it sort of shows me just how insulated Indian independent music is in a sense. Because for an artist, like for when Deepika Padukone even shows up at JNU, right? It's public outcry all over the place. But Pratik Kuwad, who is as big as it gets, I don't even think it's fair to call him an Indian independent artist anymore. I mean, he's literally been signed to an American label now. When he played at
Yeah.
China, it still wasn't there wasn't any real public outcry to it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, how do we, as people within the industry and as people who are creatives in the industry, sort of try and increase the reach so that we're not just talking to people who come from, as you yourself said, you playing in tier one cities, generally to a particular
Yeah.
country who I'm sure you yourself can acknowledge.
I think, man, voices of dissent will, I mean, like exist in their own subcultures. It's just about when it blows up into the mainstream, right? I think um, it sort of loses its purpose if Pratik Kuhad was marketing himself as, hey, this needs to reach everybody. I feel some things just like click and then they blow up out of proportion, right? So I feel it's good in a way because I wish people weren't using this to market themselves, So that's a good thing. Like people are putting it out, they're supporting their causes in their own way. Ankur Tiwari doing it. He put out a song. That's what it is about. Like, and then if something really clicks, then it blows up, and that's it. Like that's the message reached. But I feel like you shouldn't be desperate about sort of making it reach 100 million people just because it's a voice of dissent. I feel that sort of loses its purpose also. You're doing it in your own circles, two people. It's like change starts at home, right? Like a lot of my sort of friends tell me that, I mean, why can't you, I mean, your parents are voting for that particular party. You guys can't make a change at home. How is it gonna? How are you gonna impact like 100,000 people? So even if 1,000 people listen to what I'm trying to say and just question it, that's great, man. Like if 5,000 artists do it, you already have a bunch of people who don't ascribe to that view.
No, that's completely fair. I agree. I think it's more it's the genuineness of it gets lost when a protest song becomes a heavily marketed social media phenomenon as opposed
Yeah, like,
to
yeah,
organic.
yeah.
But
It
yeah,
needs to feel like everybody's movement, right? Yeah.
then just now to segue from the more serious topics, I just have like about 15 like quick questions. I just want you to drop me like as fast as possible. Just give me an answer, and then based
I
on
hate.
let's just see. Ask again.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, what's been the favorite live show you've attended, international or national?
U2. U2 was insane.
Or the one in December?
Yeah.
Ah, come on. Favorite live show you played at?
IIT Delhi back in 2012.
Wow, that's a long time ago. Your favorite band internationally?
Carnival.
Sorry?
Carnival. It's an
Oh,
Australian band. Yeah.
favorite Indian artist?
Hmm. Peter Cat.
Your favorite singer?
Ever?
Ever.
I would say John Mayer, man. Like I feel like it's yeah.
Oh, then this next one. Who would you pick, Mayor or Dylan?
Mayer.
Biggest inspiration?
Hmm. So I would say Mayer also, but also Nutini. Like Paolo Nutini is in terms of writing, I feel like he's a genius. Yeah.
Personal preference wise, do you prefer singer-songwriter or more rock and roll?
Now singer-songwriters, but back like I mean prog rock when I was growing up, yeah. But now singer-songwriters for sure because I've realized the beauty of self-expression. Like personal expression is very hard to find when it comes to bands, and the only bands which do really well have that personal expression. But singer-songwriters for the backstories, sucker for that.
The first gig you want to play at once COVID subsides?
I want to do like a bunch of house gigs. Yeah, 30 people, intimate setups, talk to lots of people, hang out. Yeah,
The dream gig you'd like to play at, like anywhere in the world?
Madison Square Garden.
An Indian artist you'd love to work with in the future?
Parik and Singh.
An international artist you'd love to work with in the future?
Mm, I would love to work with Charlie Puth. I think he's crazy. Yeah, he's so talented.
Your favorite Beatles song?
8 days a week. Because I wish I had 8 days a week.
And just this one, you can give me five. Just your either your favorite songs or just the five songs that are in your head right now that you can't get out of.
Okay, so let me take out my Spotify playlist then. Yeah, is that okay? I'll just quickly I'll tell you what I'm listening to. And I'll give you lots more than that. I've been finding some sick music. Wait. Okay. So, Dear Madeline, Dhruv Vishwanath. Okay. There is, I've been listening to Curtis Waters' Stunning. Then, wait, I'll tell you. Tangerine, Glass Animals, that entire album is absolutely sick. Heat Waves, Glass
Oh, wow.
Animals is amazing. I've been listening to J. Cole, The National, I Need My Girl, that's a sick song. Skin Shape, I Didn't Know, is a beautiful song. Then, yeah, I think this is good. Aaron Taylor, this song called I Think I Love You Again is amazing. I love it. Two Door Cinema Club, What You Know. Also throwing it back to Tere Mere Saath Mein by Lucky Ali, that's been playing a lot. And Hilltop by Sky Rabbit. Yeah.
I have it's an interesting one. So we have I remember when I was doing a piece for Indie Music Diaries about classic Indian rock, and the editor Akshay Kapoor just pointed me to these guys, and I heard Antico Ganpati for the first time. Man, that song just really blew me away. You know what happened to?
Yeah, Rakshit is a good friend of mine.
See, he
He's
makes.
releasing music under your chin, bro.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's still around. He's doing. He's a big ad producer now. He makes. I've sung on a bunch of his ads also now, and he's a cool guy, man. Your chin is what his solo project is. Very similar to Sky Rabbit.
So just to pick up from some things over there, I noticed like this is something personal to me because the Glass Animals album was something that I absolutely loved, right? Like start to finish, I thought it was phenomenal. But interestingly, like it was an album that really split critical opinion. Like a lot of critics gave it really terrible reviews, and I couldn't.
Yeah.
But generally, as an artist, and I know India doesn't
Hmm.
really have a fully fledged like a Pitchfork or a like a Rolling Stone that's actually giving 1 star, 5 star reviews. How do you sort of see the criticism industry impacting your artistry?
Man, I actually don't care at all because I feel like I'm so critical of my music. I'm so conscious of what I put out that unless I'm super happy, I don't put it out. Man, I've wasted so much money. I can't even tell you. I have songs recorded fully which I haven't put out because I'm not happy. Everybody shits on me for that. I've spent 50,000 bucks on a music video which has never seen light of day because I'm so anal about it. So I feel like if I'm happy, I'm super happy. I don't give a shit about anybody else. It's just that, and that's my filter because I have to live with it that I put out a piece of music all my life, right? It's going to stay there. It can't be taken down. So I'm super particular about it, and I feel I don't care about anybody else's opinion. Honestly, if I'm happy, if I'm happy, then it should be good. Yeah.
It's I guess that there's a difference of opinion with some artists compared to others. Like I know like a lot of hip hop artists have a tendency to just throw out projects, it's like massive album, 20 different tracks. And then the way it works over there is you generate so much because there's so many different songs on the project that when you're streaming,
Mm.
inevitably you're gonna gain more airplay. But I guess
Mm.
do you ever think of that sense that okay, if I at least put out more music, that eventually it's going to reach more ears, or it's full on, it needs to be quality?
Because it needs to be expression, bro. Like it's ultimately a story that I'm telling, right? It's really personal. Some songs I just don't release because I'm not in that headspace anymore, So I just can't go back to that time. It's very personal, right? And that's how I like it. One of the reasons why I can't write in Hindi is that I mean I can totally hire a lyricist and write for me, right? But I don't want to do it. Like it just doesn't feel like it's not like I'm a superbly amazing singer, It's literally my expression, right? Whatever I'm writing is, I can tell you an anecdote about every single song because it's about my life, right? And if I have to start thinking about Googling words which sort of rhyme in Hindi and stuff like that, it sort of defeats the purpose. Um, so it's the same. It's the same where I'm not going to think about like streaming revenue because it's that. I think the reason why I've built this following is also because I've only put out quality stuff. It might take 5 more years, but it'll happen. People are still listening to an album which is 2 years ago as much, or it's growing because it's just music that'll hopefully stay and stand the test of time. And that's what's important because that's what is the reason I haven't signed with the label is that because I feel like at 50, when I have 50 songs, that's going to be real value because everything is going to be like people are going to be listening to it even then. Hopefully, I mean, that's the hope.
Another thing that I picked up on that I feel a lot of casual listeners don't give this guy enough credit. So could you just explain why you think John Mayer should be respected as much as you actually credit him with?
Because he's a poet, dude. He's crazy. Like, I think I've never, I think I've sort of just gone through lyrics and just tried to understand what he's talking about, read interviews to understand how personal it is. It's the musicality of things. He's an incredible musician, but he chooses not to do it, right? He chooses to make it simpler and accessible. I think that's an art. Like you could be so in your head that you could be like, why the hell am I not shredding all of these songs and like shredding on these songs and soloing around, and why are they not working? Because you're so in your head that way. It's all about, because John Mayer teaches you that it's not about how many notes you can hit, literally, right? Like it's about what emotion you can drive for the person who's listening to the music at the other end. And I think that's the most important thing. The best musicians don't end up making the best music is because they're so in their head about mastering their skills, which is great. I mean, you should, but it's not about that at the end of the day. It's about that one emotion that sort of comes through in your music when it's recorded. That's also such a bit different ball game. How do you record your music to make it feel organic and authentic? I mean, it's a lot of that more than anything else. And John Mayer is like a testament to that, of how versatile he is, the kind of records he's put out, the amount of music he's put out, and how different it is each time, and what are the different things he's focused on. I've seen him grow, right? Like he's sort of writing about stuff, and now he's writing about better stuff and more intense stuff and deeper stuff. And it's like listening to him grow up, right? It's the same with Clapton, I would say. Like Clapton's also that, right? He's sort of evolved over the years to become something beautiful. So is Bob Dylan, except the musicality is something that is okay, but it was back in the day, right? So I feel John Mayer is just an evolved version of that. Just beautiful writing, man. And for me, it's all about the writing, honestly. Like, of course, musicality plays a big role, uh, but it's the soul of the song, which is ultimately which stays with you. Like, writing is what stays with you forever.
That's really interesting because I think that with Mayer at least it's a trend that every musician I talk to gives him so much respect. You know, I talking to guitarists and they're like, "This guy is my idol." It wasn't like Hendrix is my idol; it was John Mayer is my idol. And even the guy plays with the Grateful Dead like right now. So I mean, it's clear that he is given undue respect amongst musicians, but there's still a tendency
Yeah.
sort of this pretentious class of music listeners who will, put on a Glass Animals album or will put on a Floyd album, but they won't go to John Mayer, they won't go to an Ed Sheeran, or be it for whatever reasons maybe.
That's fine, man. Like, it's to your own. Like whatever people like listening to, I honestly feel like, I mean, music is such a personal experience also, right? It depends on when you heard that song, which part of the day you heard that song, which phase of your life did you hear that song that connected with you. It's a bunch of different things, right? It's literally like how my ears are tuned to listening to rock music, right? When I was 13, I was going crazy listening to heavy shit, right? Now I can't do that with other genres of music because that's who I am, like it's the same with hip hop right now. 13-year-old Indians in across the country are growing up on hip hop. They are going to lap it up, right? No matter what they hear. So it's a lot of like tuning to that level. Like what you like is what you, at what stage of your life did you hear it, and which is why old people love their classic rock, because it reminds them of their childhood or their college days when they were free and young and whatever. So it's all about the experience. So I feel like Glass Animals, if they put out a new album, it's ultimately what they're feeling, yeah, at that particular point of time, right? I might resonate with it, but a guy who's probably heard all their albums before this might not resonate with it, which is fine. That's fine. It attracts a new audience base, for example.
It's a big debate that I keep having with friends of mine is whether this current crop of popular music, hip hop music, that actually holds the same level of timelessness as generations past. Whether you will be listening, whether you will be talking about the hip hop music you hear today the same way we will talk about the music we grew up on, whether it's Nirvana or I guess more to our generation, some Linkin Park, Green Day, Metallica, stuff like that. Do you think that timelessness is just a product of music being accepted by the youth at that time and then them taking it later? Or do you think that there needs to be something a little bit more? Because it's been now 60 years since the Beatles started. And I would still say that 60 years from now, people will remember that music more than they will remember anything that's come out since. That's both
Yeah,
just a
I
feeling I have.
agree. I agree. But at the same time, like there are different genres of hip hop, right? There's mumble rap, which nobody's gonna care about in 5 years. But guys like J. Cole and all of these guys will last. Like, I mean, it is gonna last because they're talking about much deeper stuff, which is gonna resonate at every level. So it's ultimately writing again, right? It's about what you stand for, what you're writing about. It's a lot of that. I think if you look at it, like the best songs, you would know what they stand for, right? You might love the melody, but you'll also know the lyrics for that song, and that's what drives you because that evokes a feeling in your head, right? You might be hooked to a melody for a year, but the songs which really take last you a long time is what it meant to you or what the artist is trying to say through that song. So if the writing is great, it is going to take you. It is going to last long, organically. The melody will stay and go away in your head because right now it's just like it's obsessive. You're just like you're just constantly repeating it. But the songs which will stay is ones which have great melodies and great writing, and that happens with hip hop. People are writing some insane shit, right? Like, and those guys who are, they are going to stay. Like, they're going to be around for 20 more years at least. Yeah.
A question that I actually forgot to ask in the rapid fire, and it's something that I dislike using this word because I feel that guilty pleasure shouldn't be a guilty pleasure. Everyone should just be vocal about what they enjoy. But I guess you know what I mean when I say what would your favorite guilty pleasure song or artist be in that sense?
Uh, Man, I really liked Avril Lavigne, and I still go back to listening some of her music. It's great, man. I don't know if Limp Bizkit is a guilty pleasure, but some of those songs are obnoxious, right? Like there's Nookie and all of that. But I love that music, man. It's so great. Like Avril Lavigne at that time for me was just like I had the biggest crush on her. But at the same time, she wasn't this typical like sort of. She was a rocker, you know. So at that time, she just stood for way more than it. And sometimes I just like jam to it. Even Limp Bizkit, for that matter. Like now, I don't know how much I identify with Fred Durst. He was just like a white guy being a tool. But at the same time, I mean, I love the vibe, yeah. So I mean, I think Limp Bizkit and Avril Lavigne would be two guilty pleasures, but that's what I believe in that in terms of like nothing is. I mean, you don't need to. Music is just a thing, man. You should just not take it so seriously, you know.
Anant has actually just texted me to ask you because he went to the same school as you. What your thoughts?
Who?
Anant, my co-founder, he went to the same
Okay.
school as me, as you, and he asked me to ask you what your thoughts on Kajol ma'am are. If you,
Amazing. She was so sweet. Kajal ma'am, her name is, and she was. I think from a really young age, she really encouraged me to do it, to do music, and I think she spoke to my parents also when I was really young, saying you should really encourage him to do music, and I sort of didn't do it as much in school because I was playing tennis a lot. But I always listened to really good music, right? Like I had four best friends from school who I really like. uh, One of them is Abhijit Sood, who plays for Revisit, who used to play for Revisit, and he's one of the biggest drummers in the country. And we were in a school band together, and we just like, I mean, loved music because it was the four of us just like vibing. So yeah, I mean, school played a really important role that way, for music, and Kajal ma'am was at the center of it. She made us all fall in love with the school music and generally all the music that the school sort of choir used to sort of present to the school.
do you see yourself making that the kind of music that you made in college again? Because I know you were part of that prog rock outfit, and it's
100%.
different.
I mean, yeah, man, for sure. I think the only thing that I feel like I am always right. If you look at the outro of "I am always right," it is that, you know, uh, it's going into that direction. But I think I'm also growing older and I'm becoming a softie. But at the same time, I feel so. What I didn't enjoy about writing as a band was that it didn't give me the flexibility to improvise on vocal melodies. Because right now my music is so vocally driven, vocal melody driven, that I want to write that and that everything else comes with it. But what happens in a band is that somebody gives you a structure and then you're stuck to that structure, right? Unless you're really good friends with the person or whatever. Like it takes years to sort of build that understanding, right? Which is what I love as a solo project. It's mine, you know. I get to choose whether I want to change the structure, keep it this structure, keep it not. I love that freedom to be able to express myself, which I didn't ever find with the band, and that's what I discovered when I bought my first acoustic guitar. And I was like, "Whoa, I can go from here to there. There are no rules because nobody else is defining them." Um, So yeah, 100%. Like I feel like my live set is pretty much a lot of like, I mean, it's not prog, but it's definitely not the softer music that I play. It's definitely just up. You've seen it. It's completely up tempo. Come and dance your ass off, right? So the idea is that over time I am going to write heavier music, but it's going to be more like dancey music because that's what I enjoy doing now. Like I listen to a lot of like Whitest Boy Alive, Two Door Cinema Club and stuff like that, right? So I want to keep people grooving. I think that's what I enjoy the most now. So stick to that, and then if you can incorporate some prog elements to it, for sure. But like Tool is definitely one of my favorite bands of all time. Carnival is. So yeah, I mean, definitely roots are roots. Yeah.
That's interesting because obviously I saw your gig and it was definitely a lot more up tempo because people were all on their feet and it was. I knew it was going to be successful because I knew what the Ashoka crowd was like, but I think a lot of people were a bit like they were like, oh, they wanted to see Local Train, you know, they wanted to see this big arena rock band show up over here. And you, when I asked you what kind of gig you want to play at, you said you want to play at a small 30-person close setting. So
Yeah.
is there some dissonance now? You just that's just the one thing you just want to.
It's two sets. It's basically two sets. You call the band and you get this, and you call me solo. Then I want everybody to be sitting around. Basically. So that's how I distinguish between the two. So I won't even play City Life at my live gig because it's not that set, bro. It's like you want to come and just have a great time. You don't care about listening to. I mean, you don't care about like listening to great melodies and stuff. Of course, if it's a better setup, I get great lighting, then I can sort of make people sort of calm down for one or two songs and then go back up again. But in your kind of setting at a Ashoka, it had to be just like start from the top like as a banger and you end it like a banger. That was the idea.
But would you prefer like these festival sort of setups, or you like the more intimate? I'm with my audience. My audience.
It's a bit of both, man. I mean, the band said I don't make enough money on, but I love doing it because that's what I enjoy doing, right? I always wanted to be the front man of a band. Like that's what I did when I was in my college band, right? So, I mean, that's what I always wanted to do, and it's so much fun, yeah. Like to be able to bully an audience to come in front from the first song and make them dance for 45 minutes, and to see an audience which is having a blast is way better than making them sit down and making. I mean, of course, it's a different connect. But if I'm playing with a band, that's all I want to do. I don't want them to sit and listen to me. I don't want that. I want them to go crazy, and that's so much fun on stage because then the band also has a lot of fun. And you haven't seen a proper set because those are all session musicians, right? So I have like this. I have a really cool band in Bombay. Like I have a Catholic guitarist who is always making the most inappropriate jokes. He's literally like a stand-up set, and the drummer's just like playing some grooves, and he's talking rubbish. So it's a lot of fun. Like we do a lot of banter on stage, and it's a really fun set. Like in our gigs, we actually got people to come up and say some lines which are funny, and like it's ridiculous, but that's the idea.
Yeah, their bassist at the time actually is a member of Submarine in Space because I remember when he came.
Yeah. So both of them were Submarine Space. It was just a makeshift band that I put together for Ashoka. Yeah.
Yeah. But does it feel like a bit more conscious, you know, when you're playing to a crowd of people who are dead silent, just looking at you in the eyes, and you're just playing a song, as opposed to when you're actually getting a crowd to feel the energy, so to speak.
Which is why I feel like it can't happen. There's no impact if it's slow music in a large scale arena because the idea is that you either understand the words or you understand the groove. So if I don't get that intimate setting, it's going to bomb because then you're talking because you don't care. Like it's not like I'm doing some crazy skills where I'm beating up the guitar like Dhruv or singing some crazy high notes where people are in awe, right? It's all about the emotion and the expression. So unless I get that captive audience to sort of get them into that journey, there's no point.
Sure. Well, I feel some of the most powerful performances I've ever seen have been like ones where you have entire arenas stand still and listen. Like there's a Simon and Garfunkel when they're playing Sound of Silence. It doesn't matter how big the crowd is. Everyone shuts up. So that there is.
But it needs that setting.
Yeah, it does.
Needs that the artist needs to like. I mean, Sounds of Silence, everybody knows, right? They're all looking for
respect for the song.
And also the setting. Like they'll always make sure then the spotlight is on them. Like it's the production. It's all of that. Like the lights everywhere will shut. it's not just like suddenly the guitarist starts playing a soft song and everybody starts. It's manufactured and produced like that to give it that effect.
I guess just the last thing I want to ask is about, you played a lot of covers when you were in Ashoka. I guess at that time, songs from Matchbox hadn't been completely finished up, and it hadn't been,
Yeah.
of course. But your live sets now, do you still rely on cover music, or you prefer to just be whole?
No, we just do one or two. We do like a New Shoes or a Budapest because that like people just know it and sort of look forward to that. But the rest is completely like it's a 50-55 minute set with like 12 original songs and two covers. So yeah, and it also the reason why I played a lot of covers at that set at Ashoka was also because I was playing with entirely new musicians. So to sort of explain the structure, it was easier to sort of give them four like covers which they knew already, and then work on like a specific number of songs. Otherwise, it becomes too much for them to handle on the day of the gig. Because with 2-3 practice sessions, it's very hard to do.
For sure. Oh, I mean, thanks so much for joining me, man, Raghav. This has been a great conversation. But if you have anything you'd like to sort of tell to your fans, or actually, if you had any advice as well for any up and coming musicians, up and coming people who are doing digital
Yeah.
marketing and the like, please.
No, I don't know. I think I mean who am I to give advice? But I feel I think the couple of things that I've sort of I feel like have worked for me is a consistency for sure. Like it's nothing like being consistent, especially if you're trying to build a narrative and a following. And the second bit is that just enjoy it, because I stopped enjoying it for a bit, and that's when I felt all of those emotions and like felt like I was going through a slump and all of that, right? So find the the mechanism that makes you happy. It doesn't mean if you're a songwriter, you don't need to write 5 songs a month, you know? It's a journey. If you're going to do it, I'm going to do it till I'm 60, 65, whatever. I'm going to do it forever. So that should be your goal, and it's not short term. So if you're not being able to write a song, don't worry about it. Figure out other things that work for you on the side, so that this gives you happiness, right? If you're not enjoying it, you're not the other, like people listening to it aren't going to enjoy it. So I think that's the most important, and you have to figure out your life basis that to what is going to make you enjoy it and do it carefree without having the burden of paying rent and figuring out the monies behind it. If you have that sort of financial sort of comfort already, great. I mean, then go for it full on and spend all your time doing it. But if you don't and you think that's going to bother you, then you figure out other stuff you can do on the side.
Yeah, I mean, thanks so much. This has been a lot of mix of both. I'd say a lot of informative information for people within the industry and the songwriting process, creating an album, but also really fun conversation as well about your own personal taste in music, interests.